I'd like to welcome you all here this evening. This is still part of our Right to Farm programs we've been putting on. This one's rather important if you're a farmer because it's an opportunity for you to talk planning and zoning and tell them what you as a farmer, how you would like to be defined in the next land use comprehensive plan update. So it's an opportunity for you to have some input. We're not going to talk at you too much. We're going to give you a little bit of information, but the night belongs to the farmers for their input and how they think they, like I say, how you think you should be defined in the new 5-year updated plan. As the Farmland Work Group, which we are part of the Campbell County Conservation District, we realized back in 2003 that at one time our county had over 1,200 farms. By 2002 we were down to just a little over 500. I mean by one or two farms maybe over 500. So a lot of the farmers in the area, in the county, becoming concerned about the loss of their farmland and specifically where their grandkids and children would farm in the future. We were running out of farmland in the county. So we actually did a survey of the population, cross survey of not only farmers, but we included high school kids who really weren't farm orientated, and we did FFA of course, and we did our northern neighbors. And when we come to find out that everybody, after being made aware, felt those concerns also about the disappearing farmland and the rural way of life. Okay, I gotta use the mic now. But anyway, the long story short, it gave us the incentive to go ahead and do a farmland study of our county. You know, we incorporated, or we hired Farmland Trust to do the studies for us, and they're experts at it. We weren't going to try to do it because they have the procedures and policies in place to get the information and data that we were needed. Actually, we were wondering if it was worth saving. So with that in mind, we asked them to do a farmland study, and this is kind of a, let's get over it. But anyway, long story short, they did a study and we found out that agriculture is still a viable entity here in the county. It's still an economic generator for the county, and in the end their study said, after doing the study, they said farmland was worth looking at on ways to preserve what working farms that we have and keep them going. We also did a cost of community services, and what we found out that, and we always suspected this, but we didn't really know until we did our own study, that for every dollar the county received in taxes from residential development, they spent over $1, I think it was $1.58 in services for that tax dollar. When it came to commercial, for every dollar they received from commercial, they spent 58 cents on infrastructure and support. And the farmland fell right in that category also. I think we were down around maybe 38 cents worth of our tax dollar went for our infrastructure and support. So what we found out was that there's some economic reasons for the county to keep farmland viable and working. Found out that those cows out there don't need a new school when you increase your herd. So there were some good things. We don't need the super infrastructure. We don't need 4-lane highways to get us anywhere. We just need a good 2-lane to get us out to the major thoroughfares. But that was a study that was worth doing, which made us become involved in this process of updating the comprehensive plan.
Would you like to start?
Yeah, just keep going. I know I'm sprayed. We found that in the comprehensive plan, I think that 10 years ago, we looked at the comprehensive plan, and the only agricultural mentioned in that plan was 1 or 2 sentences in a paragraph. So we became really involved in the last update, which I think took place in what, 2006,
It
7?
started in 2006, we
Yeah.
ended up in 2008.
But when we were finished, you know, the planners and the people working together realized that agriculture played an important role in our county and in the land use of our county, and we became mentioned in economic development, we became mentioned in environmental issues, but, so we got some mention, and I think we started to make people aware that agriculture is still alive and well in this county. So tonight, and I'm going to hand it over to Cindy here shortly, but tonight is your opportunity to give us your opinion, and by us, I mean the planning people, and there's a lot of them here tonight who want to hear what you have to say about how our land use and our farm should look when this plan is updated. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Cindy.
I'm sorry. I'm going to go back through a little bit of this farmland data, just kind of set the stage a little bit. This is really similar to what we knew back when the last comprehensive plan. I'm sorry.
Cindy,
Yeah.
try to clip it on your lapel.
Okay. I'm sorry.
See what that does. I'm at
Is that better?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay.
Let go.
I apologize. This was the agricultural districts. This is a 2010 snapshot. There was a similar snapshot back in 2005 throughout the state of Kentucky. So these are the areas where agricultural districts have actually been defined. And if you zoom in on Campbell County, there's actually pretty many with respect to the entire state. And we knew that in the last comprehensive plan update. We also knew that we had A1 zones and we had RRE zones, rural residential estates. And we knew that there was a number of registered farms from the USDA for Campbell County. But that's really all we knew.
We didn't have the depth that we have today. And I credit the Conservation District and the Farmland Work Group for working together to gather more information from the last comprehensive plan update to today to tell us a little bit more about it. So from the PBA's standpoint, these are all the farms that have agricultural valuation within the area. And I'm going to mention these are parcels as opposed to farms. So you really kind of want to look at the acreage that's involved with it. I'm going to flip back for a minute so you can kind of see in 2012 from the USDA standpoint, we're down to 42,000 acres. But really from PBA's standpoint, we're looking at 57,000 acres. And then the group went a little bit farther and said, okay, how much of that acreage can we actually identify as being farm? And they went through and actually categorized this as an active farm, this is woods and wildlife, and what that total comes up to. They actually went and categorized it by specific farm types. And if you want to look at these in more detail, there's boards on the sides of the room that you can look at in a little bit more detail on those. And then this is just kind of breaking it out by categories a little bit more, as Dennis talked about. And then that's kind of what ultimately then feeds back into the comprehensive plan process and gets us back into that future land use. Want to talk, at our last meeting, we talked a little bit about things that go into from a planning and zoning perspective, but really kind of want to emphasize three items. The comprehensive plan, which ultimately feeds into our zoning ordinances and into our subdivision regulations. So when somebody comes through and wants to develop something, we say, did it fit the comprehensive plan? Did it fit, is it consistent with our zoning? Is it consistent with our subdivision regulations? And those are our three primary tools that our planning commission has to work with. When you're working through the comprehensive plan, there's many steps to it. The very first step is really that reviewing and updating the vision, goals, and objectives. We're at that stage right now. So we're at the very beginning of a new update. So I know we had a couple of comments at our last meeting, kind of jumping ahead to what the end product was going to be, but really we're at the beginning stage. And this is where we really need to have your engagement. And I thank you for coming out on such a bright, sunshiny evening So with that, I kind of want to walk you through the goals and objectives. You have a handout, hopefully, that you picked up as you came in, and if you didn't pick one up, raise your hand and we'll get an extra one because it's kind of important that you have that to work through. This is the draft version of the goals and objectives that we have to date.
I'm going to focus in on three specific ones tonight. The land use, the agricultural development, and the environmental balance. But I'm open to talking about any of them that you would like.
Mike's bad.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and, I'm going to try and use my big girl voice and see if that helps. If you can't hear me, let me know. This is kind of the history of our comprehensive plans. So starting back in 1972, that's when we did our first comprehensive plan for the county. That was really Kenton and Campbell County combined. It's progressed through the year, but it's interesting to look at some of the plan titles, and that did influence and the one that kind of struck me was, a comprehensive plan for development. That was in the 1981-82. We really weren't stressing the importance of agricultural as we went through these plans. And then in 2006, we did a Campbell County comprehensive plan update. That was a pretty extensive update. I also want to emphasize the communities that make up this comprehensive plan update, and that's the unincorporated Campbell County, as well as Crestview, Melbourne, Silver Grove, Southgate, and Woodlawn. So the other cities within Campbell County have their own independent comprehensive plan, although we do look at each other's. This is a vision statement. It's at the very front of the sheet of the handout that you have down the left side. This is a vision statement for Campbell County. This is a new statement, and we really did want to bring out the agricultural heritage that we have in Campbell County, because when you talk with someone and you start to tell them about your community, it's one of the items that always comes to play in that, as well as just a variety of other things. We've got good quality neighborhoods, we've got agricultural heritage, we've got diverse recreational opportunities, we've got environmental balance, and we have participatory governance. And then these are just some of the comments. You'll see a little bit in the red line strikeouts that I have in here. These are comments that have already been provided by some of the members of this group. But tonight we want your comments as well. So if you have additional things that you'd like to see edited on this, we want to talk about those tonight. And if you don't have any if you go home and you think of something, give us a call, send us an email, because we'd like to get your comments. We're trying to wrap this up by April the 30th, just for the goals and objectives, not for the entire comprehensive plan, just these goals and objectives. We also kind of always emphasize that as we do any comprehensive plan update, we respect that there's property ownership, we respect that there's community engagement, and we respect that there are economic considerations as well. So we don't operate in one bubble. Again, I'm going to focus in on three of them, but we can talk about any topic that you'd like to talk about tonight. This is our land use one, and to emphasize again, we've got a couple different color changes in there. These are items that were really brought out by the folks that are from the farming community that have already brought some comments forward. On our land use, and again, I've put it up on the screen, I've got it on some boards here, and we're going to open it up for discussion as well. Some of the changes from a land use perspective, and I appreciate you wordsmithing this because it's important. I am not a farmer, so when I say a word that's offensive to you or not quite fitting with your community, correct me on it. Okay, I was using the farming industry. It's not a good word, or not an appropriate phrase. So correct me to the right phrases that portray it for you. Agricultural development, we have a wide variety of agricultural development in our community. And it's something that we should be very proud of. Again, these are some changes that we've already had as we've gone through it. And then environmental balance. I don't have any changes yet on environmental balance, but I think it's important to emphasize that from an agricultural standpoint. And with that, we'd really kind of like to open it up for you for discussions and comments. Yes, sir.
With the cities that are not involved, and I didn't look at the list of, that have their own planning and zoning, what authority has the overall say with regard to the planning and zoning? Is it the county, and the county controls what the cities do? Or is there no control and the city can do whatever it wants?
From a Campbell County Municipal Planning and Zoning Commission, this is basically the area that it covers, anything that's in a color on here. So the white areas, those communities have their own comprehensive plan document. So they do their own independent document. We look at it to kind of see what matches, just as we look at Pendleton counties to kind of see what's going on. So we're not doing something that's totally incompatible next to each other, but they have their own document and their own zoning regulations.
Well, years ago, I attended a meeting that their main goal was annexation of everything they could possibly annex. So under that guise, if in fact nobody can say, no, you can't do this within the county, then how does that get stopped?
Okay. Dennis, you want to talk about agricultural districts?
Yeah, and that's a good question, and I forgot to touch on that, but
I'm going to go back and bring in agricultural districts.
agricultural districts were formed to protect individual farmers, just like yourself, from being annexed to a city because they want to grow. So if you're in an agricultural district, you cannot be annexed by a city. If you're, within their site, to enlarge their city boundaries. If you're in an agricultural district, they cannot annex you. And that's one of the advantages of being in an agricultural district. Another advantage of an agricultural district, if you're in a developing area and somebody wants to run water across your farm and you have a mile of road frontage, they used to assess the farmer the whole 9 yards for that mile across his farm, whether he wanted water or not. There was a law passed that's might been 5 to 6 years, maybe 10 years now. If you're in an agricultural district, you are not assessed that water line value going across your property until the property is sold for development. At that point, whoever buys it and wants to develop it has to pony up the dollars for that line that went across the property. So being in an ag district has some really good advantages for farmers who are near municipalities that are growing and want to grow, and that's your protection.
Dennis, you've got a map there showing the ag districts and some of the guidelines associated with that.
Yeah, an ag district is formed by 250 continuous acres, and it don't have to be the same farmer. It can be 20 farmers, it can be 10 farmers, it can be 30 farmers, as long as they make up 250 continuous acres. So these are the ag districts that we presently have in Campbell County. There are probably a lot of them that are, some people may want to join, don't even realize they're close to one, and are afforded that protection. If you're with a group, where you have that 250 acres, possible, then you can form your own ag district and without joining another one. So there's some different ways to be part of an ag district. And like I say, it affords the farmer a lot of protection. There again, being in agriculture, there's responsibilities that go with that. If you're not a farmer, you're getting levied for stormwater runoff and that. If you are a farmer, you're not being levied directly, but you got to have water quality, best management practices for your farm. So that's the reason you're not being billed a water runoff charge, because if you're a farmer in an ag district.
Do they just describe to being a farmer as the fact that you have a farming license and pay taxes in the farm, or what establishes that criteria that yes, you are a farmer?
It doesn't say, it says 250. So if you're, I've never heard it where you had to turn in any identification or any kind of, tax saying, here's what I do for a living. You've got, say you had 250 acres and you want to become an ag district, you could.
Yeah, but let's say you have 18 acres and you're attached to 6 other people that make up 250 acres, and then the person in the middle
Jumps out.
jumps out.
You're still good. That original ag district remains intact. Even though you may lose some that are originally in the ag district, You are still part of the ag district.
So how does one know that they're in an ag district?
Conservation district, that's our plan there. You can contact us, we can tell you if there's one near you, or, you know, what you need to do if you want to form one. So you can call the office and we'll give you all the pertinent information.
There's a brochure out on the table too, if you
Yeah,
want
we
more
do.
information.
Good question. Any others? We've got a group of very knowledgeable people here in the room, so this is the point in time to kind of ask those questions. If we don't know the answer tonight, we'll look it up and get back to you. Yes, sir.
I was at the meeting in Alexandria. Is this similar to the meeting that was held there at the courthouse, where there was like a pre-planning of this whole thing?
Yeah, I believe you came to one of the planning commission meetings where we were working on a draft at that point in
Right.
time. We were actually working on producing the materials for this handout.
So this is the draft?
This is the result of those discussions that you sat in on. And we're taking it out for public comment to get more people engaged in the process at this point.
I don't see on here where you're going to restrict the quantity of acreage for housing, for residential.
Rephrase your question for me so I understand it.
At that meeting, there was discussion about changing it from a 1 acre minimum to a 2 acre minimum for a residential lot.
Yeah, we were actually
I don't
talking
see-
about it in an agricultural zone,
Right.
and that was an item that we really, at that meeting, we concluded we really needed to come out and let the community come forward and say whether or not they wanted to have that discussion. The item that was up for discussion was actually in an A1 zone, or should there be a new agricultural zone, that the minimum acreage size is increased. Right now, in an A1 zone, the minimum acreage is a 1 acre lot size. And the discussion was, should that be a higher number? And part of the discussion that was going on was, we know from a sanitation standpoint, from installing a septic system, it's very difficult in Campbell County at this point to pass the health test for a septic system on a 1 acre lot without doing some significant work on that lot. That's just our soil conditions. And so the thought was, do we need to increase that minimum acreage size in an A1 zone, or possibly in the agricultural district areas, to be something other than a minimum 1 acre? At that point, the Planning Commission said, you know, this really needs to be some thoughts that come forward from the community, and whether or not they would like us to pursue that. So we're actually looking for guidance from the larger community, and if you wanted to bring that topic up for them to look at, they will.
That's why I'm here.
Okay.
I don't know why we need to extend it to 2 acres. Technology will allow things to even be smaller than 1 acre, and technology is always changing. This plan is a 5 or 10 year plan, and within 10 years there'll be a lot of technology changes. So to stay 1 acre would be acceptable, maybe even reduced, but to enlarge it would be restrictive to the landowner for the purposes of what he was thinking of.
Any other thoughts on that?
I have no thought on this, so on that.
Okay, let me get that one down. I'm on the scribe and everything tonight, if I don't make some notes. Okay. I'm sorry.
Is there a goal by the planning that, for example, you had 50-some thousand of farm acres that are still within the county? Is there a goal to preserve so many of those acres that, other than farming, there's no other use that can be applied to those acres, or no?
We don't have a goal specifically like that, at least from a planning and zoning perspective. From the conservation district, do you have any kind of goals like that?
Goals is not to, I guess, prevent development. That's where you're going. Our goals is to preserve working farms in the county. And then there again, I guess it's a balance. There is what they call an urban service area where the infrastructure has been put in place and is being put in place. And that's the US 27 corridor. And, we've already spent tax dollars and money getting that infrastructure in place along that corridor. I guess our thoughts as conservation, our goals as conservation district is to preserve land, water, and air. And, by preserving, let's put it this way, would you want to be a Hamilton County? I mean, if that's what you want to be, then, you can, this is your input, this is your opportunity to say, I want to look just like Hamilton County when this land use plan is all done. If you don't, then this is an opportunity to say, I want to preserve some of this farmland because I got kids coming up, they may want to farm. I want them to stay in the county, I don't want them to move away to farm.
Well, from a county perspective, whether I have a child that's going to farm or not, the value of having farm acreage within the county as just in and of itself probably has extreme value.
It does.
I remember attending a meeting over at Northern Kentucky years ago about the planning and zoning that was done around Lexington and how that was impossible here because of all of the different governmental agencies that are involved. But the preservation of the farm acreage, horse farm, whatever you want to call them, was an important criteria for what that county and that area stood for. And there again, having some goal of preserving an amount of acreage for farming or farm type use, to me, would be a value consideration. So we don't become an urban whatever.
But see, and then Lexington, if you're familiar with, they started out with making plot sizes, 10 acres or whatever. And it's too big to mow and too little to be productive as a farm, is what happened there. And I don't know what they still live by that rule, or they've increased it. But that was their attempt to save the horse farm, which that's Lexington's industry. If they're all gone, there's not much to offer in Lexington.
Well, they were going around, if I remember correctly, and actually getting the property rights donated so that there was nothing that could be done other than its current use.
Well, if you look at at one time, and I know as a growing up, your farm was your retirement. When you got too old to feed the cows anymore, what you do, you sell the farm so you'd have some money to live on. And you had no other alternative. That was your 401k. But now, if you look at the global market, I've got people buying farms next to me from Florida, Atlanta, Georgia. The value of that farmland is a whole hell of a lot more than it was, when I was growing up and there was 1,200 farms around, you know what I'm saying? So it's become a very valuable commodity that it never used to be, just because it's becoming less and less open space. It's up to the farmers whether they want to save it or not. It's not going to be a government entity that says, you got to save your farm. It's going to be the farmers. It's going to be your choice do you want to put your land in a conservation easement voluntarily? Or do you want to see a program within the county, a local program, where they pay you for your development rights? Massachusetts has, believe it or not, as one of the first and largest conserving farmland where they pay you for your development rights. They've seen, and they've had one for 20 years, but they've seen up front that it was going to be gone if they didn't do something where that farmer who can't farm anymore, they're paying him his 401k, and then he can hand it off to whomever wants to farm. Open space is a commodity if you get up into Massachusetts. But here again, it's going to be the farmers that do this. It's not going to be any government entity telling you got to save farms.
No, but having that as one of our desirable outcomes from the planning, zoning, and
Right.
conservation district, to me, would have some value.
Right. That's the reason you're here.
And the tools in which to
Preserve.
to preserve it.
And there's quite a few tools out there, if we choose to, start using those tools. Ag districts is one of them. There's several. The conservation easements is another. PDR program is another. Zoning, how they do zoning, if the agriculture community says, here's what, we want this area where we're working, farming to look like, that's another tool. So that's why you're here. We want to hear your input, and it's going to be farmers who eventually say yay or nay to preserving what we have. mean,
Dennis, he wasn't at the last meeting that we had where you all had summarized a little bit of the farmland study and some of the efforts that, the input that you all had with the, with Daniel Braun with the PDA office. And I think that was valuable information that a lot of the farmers learned of the work that some of you guys have been doing with our authorities.
well, agriculture, like I said, 10, 15 years ago, we weren't even on the radar. I mean, we weren't, you know, if you had a farm, you were land waiting for somebody to build a ton of houses on, or some strip mall or whatever. That's how we were viewed in planning. Oh, like I say, we realized what was going on, and as farmers would have to step up and say, this is not right, this is what we want. We got agriculture out there, it's viable, we make money doing it. You know, Campbell's becoming a big agritourism place, believe it or not. If you look at the entities, it's just kind of snuck up on us. It wasn't planned, wasn't promoted. We just have a bunch of farmers out there looking for ways to preserve their farm, and we've become actually quite an agritourism entity. Now, that's farming, and that's preserving the farm. It's not the traditional way of farming as you may view it, but we're still preserving, you know, our heritage and our farm. So, and what was you said?
Just
Oh, yeah, and PVA. When we started looking at PVA evaluations, I guess maybe 5, 6 years ago, there was no consistency. They was charging one guy something for his property, you know, for his land, and another guy a different price. There was no consistency. So we sat down with Daniel and said, how come? Well, you know, in the KRS, it tells you how you're supposed to evaluate land. There's classes of land, and most of where we are is not the higher class land. And so, you know, they weren't following that KRS when they were evaluating your property, your land, and your soil maps. They weren't using them. And I think it became the routine. I don't think, and it may have been intentional, you know, if nobody squeals, why change it, you know? But eventually somebody squealed, and they realized that we need to follow the KRS when we come to evaluating land. Another thing was buildings. You know, they were evaluating our old barn out there like it was a commercial building. You know, we addressed that situation and got that back under control so that, you know, we weren't being priced out of the farming business because we had a 150-year-old barn that, you know, we may just put hay in. You know, it's not, we didn't want it assessed as a commercial building. And some 100-year-old barns are just sitting there empty. So, you know, we addressed that with PVA, but it's been farmers doing this. If nobody had stepped up, we'd still be under the gun, I guess. So, and I guess from my perspective, you know, when the bulldozer pulls in next door, it's too late to do anything about it. Now's the time to do something before they even think about bringing the dozer in. So that's, yes.
What to say that about a bulldozer pulling in, a family wants to sell the farm to get their inheritance and that, and is planning and zoning going to put stiff guidelines on it so a
Well, it's going to be up to you.
developer can't
It's going to be up to the farmer to say, you know, in this area here, you know, we want to see our family maybe build on the farm so they can have what we've had, you know. But it's going to be up to the farmer to say, I want to protect it. I want some way of, you know, that it just don't go to the highest builder and we throw something in there that's going to cost the taxpayer money to run the infrastructure, run roads, you know.
because planning and zoning has their guidelines
Right,
on how.
and that's what we're doing. They'll develop a lot of these guidelines from the input they get from us. So that's what we're doing here. So yes.
Kind of circling back, this isn't the, these are the comments, the edits that have been made to that first draft that was out there. And the number one thing they did was actually move it up to the top and highlight it was support the preservation and growth of working farms and agricultural enterprises. These are some pretty, I think, some pretty good changes that your peers have brought forward. If there are more edits that you'd like, this is the point in time when we want to hear those items. I also noted there's some note cards on your table. If you don't feel comfortable speaking out tonight or you want to jot down some notes on them and give them to us, please feel free to use these note cards as well. Yes, sir.
Just make a couple comments. I know anyone that owns a piece of property likes to think that that's a piece of inheritance they give to your kids, and we sell out lots and make some money off of it, and I'm in that position as well. But there's a lot to be said, if you're going to sell 5-acre lots, is it just as much value as 5 1-acre lots? You know, the value of land, what we have in Campbell County is really unique. We don't have a Florence in Boone County out here, and what we have here, if we don't take care of it, we're going to be like it is over there. And that's kind of what we talk about a lot with conservation, trying to preserve our natural environment that we have. We have the Backroads Farm Tour, and a lot of people from the inner city really love to come out and see what's going on out here. They like to live in this community. We all here tonight, I'm sure, like to live where we are because of the environment that we live in. If you start selling half-acre lots off of a farm, you're going to have a lot of houses, and you're going to lose all of that natural environment. And it behooves the planning and zoning people. It's a struggle for those folks to make those decisions. The high-density building needs to occur in some areas, but it does not need to occur in the agricultural area. We need to preserve that part of the county, or we're going to lose it. We have a great asset here, and we need to preserve that.
Thank you. Other comments? Points of discussion? Yes.
So you go back to the discussion about the R1 minimum lot size.
Mhm.
I mean, to go back to what Ron said, if you had 50 acres and you know, technically you could subdivide it 50 lots. Well, there's no way that 50 acres in Campbell County is going to percolate 50 septic tanks. Any place I know of.
Yeah.
So
Be very difficult.
maybe you ought to consider another zone. If you had an area that had water and sewer but was still agricultural, you could have maybe a 1 acre or maybe even a half-acre lot size. But in areas that it's totally impractical to have a 1 acre lot size, like out near where I live in California, I think it's almost deceitful to a developer for them to think they can come in here and buy this and subdivide it. I think it's Boone County learned their lesson. Boone County's minimum acre in R1 now is 5 acres. And so I think you need to consider heavily going to a much larger lot size in the unincorporated part of the county. There's no batch plants anymore. Division of Water doesn't okay batch plants. The sewer district doesn't maintain them anymore. I'm sure that the sewer district is trying to get most places with batch plants onto the sewer system. So I know there's places in Campbell County that were subdivided half-acre, maybe even quarter-acre lots that are on septic tanks, and they're trying to get them into the sewer district. So it's untenable to have 1 acre all over the county, to my mind, anyway, where the soil percolates.
If you were going, I'm going to start at the beginning there. When you mentioned going to a smaller lot size, at that point I would say the zoning for an A1 zone is not appropriate. And at that point, a different type of zone
Right.
needs to be used for that property. And we have many zones where you can have less than 1 acre in size. If the citizens of Campbell County wanted us to want to add a new zone that perhaps is a larger minimum lot size, that's certainly something we can look at. I've heard from 2 of you in the room that are on opposite end of the spectrum. I'd like to hear more dialogue on that. I know the planning commissioners would like to hear more dialogue on that.
Have you asked any questions of the Northern Kentucky Health Department, which is the entity that does give out the permits? They can answer your questions and say what a lot size is acceptable. Because that is where it all really goes. And that's nothing against planning and zoning. That's where you get your permit at.
Yeah, and we do allow, they drive where the permits, whether or not there is
So if they were to allow a 1/10 of an acre permit, would that be acceptable? If they were to allow it, I ask.
It's not a matter of whether or not they would allow a 1/10 of an acre permit, it's whether or not that particular lot, with its particular soil conditions, can support a septic system. And so acreage really doesn't play into it as much as we know that it's a challenge if you have a 1 acre lot.
And that's what my question is if the health department was to approve a permit for 1/10 of an acre, this 2 acre or 5 acre or 1 acre lot size would be restrictive to that property owner.
I think we're not just talking about where you can put your sewage. You know, we're talking about land use, what size lots we want to live on, what size lots are appropriate in different types of zones. So I think if you're looking at somewhere and you'd like to have 1/10 of an acre, the agricultural area might not be the right place for that. There might be a better residential zone that's a little closer to the services that have sewer, that have water, that might be a better fit for that type of lot.
I hear what you're saying. And my first activity in this was when I heard that they were going to go from 1 acre to 2 acre. Because if you have 100 acres, that just made your property 50% less as giving it out to siblings. Instead of giving it out to 100 siblings, you can only give it out to 50 siblings.
And I think that's part of the discussions that we want to have, and, you know, not necessarily let the sewage drive it, but do we want our agricultural lands to be able to divide it into 1 acres or 2 acres or 10 acres? I think that's a discussion to be had.
But at that meeting and what he had just said, the sewage was the driving factor of why we need 5 acre lots.
Sewage is one factor, but it is not the only driving factor. And I believe we had another individual that wanted to.
Well, I think the difficulty is the infringement of personal rights versus the overall what is best for the community and what is best for the county. And that's just, it's a delicate thing. I might have a farm and I want to divide it. It sounds like he might like to. Me, on the other hand, I'd rather see the 5 acres and preserve some of the pristine quality that we have. So, you know, and where, whose rights, you know, are we going to eliminate, or are we going to put some constraints on? Because that's technically what you're doing, you're planning and zoning. You're constraining somebody from doing something.
Right. And I'm gonna come back that if you were looking to do small 1/4 acre lots or something of that size, then the zone is not an A1 zone. At that point, the zone is a different zone to be able to put those 1/4 acre lots out there. At that point, it's no longer agricultural. And you would have to go through a zone change for something other than agricultural.
That lot would be, not the whole parcel, but just that lot.
What you're wanting to change to a 1/4 acre.
Correct.
We do have some minimum requirements if you wanted to rezone a piece of property, and I can talk through with those. If you wanted to rezone 1 1/4 acre lot in the middle of 100 acres of agricultural, it needs to be connected to another zone that you want it to be similar
Well,
to.
the devil's advocate in this is if you, let's just say we go to the 5 acre lots.
Mhm.
The option for the property owner is just go ahead and get annexed by a city and have 10,000 square foot lots. So you've defeated the purpose to the property owner. He could just say, okay, annex me and subdivide me.
I'm not saying that globally, and I don't think the other individuals in this room are saying globally, everything in an A1 zone, we now need to raise from 1 acre to 2 acres. I think what we're discussing is there a need to create another agricultural zone, like an A2 zone, where some farms may choose to say, I want my minimum lot acreage to be a larger number.
And that would be an individual choice. For example, I could say, I've got 200 acres and I would like mine to be A5.
That's what we need to
That-
work
that-
through.
I mean,
That's what we need to work through as a community to say, do we want to create a zone like that?
Okay.
And then how would we implement it?
Yeah, because there's no technically farm representative organization that represents all the farmers and they come up with a collective agreement that this is what we want. I mean, there's no, right? I mean, at least if there is, I don't know that.
Yeah. That's why we've reached out to the Conservation District. That's why we've reached out to the Farmland Work Group. That's why we're having this discussion tonight, is to try and reach that community because it is a little bit spread out, even though it's very valuable to our county. But that's why we're here tonight, to try and have that discussion and to let you hear from each other. Because we all have, you know, a different point of view. And it's important to remember that the comprehensive plan is not just for the agricultural uses, even though we're focusing on the agricultural. This plan also includes Southgate, Silver Grove, Melbourne, Woodlawn, and Crestview. So there's a lot of community in there. What's really important is work back to these words, because that's what's going to feed information going forward. The next kind of steps on this is to work through these goals and objectives. At the same time, we're gathering all the demographic information, including the information on the working farms that have been pulled together since our last comprehensive plan. Start to feed that together, compare that with our land use as it is today, in our future land use plan from the last time, and to say what kind of adjustments do we want to make, if any. And then it's likely that you would have recommendations that'll come out of the comprehensive plan that may say, I want these to be some action items. And one of those recommendations could be, I want another zone.
But who decides that? Okay, let's say I want another zone, okay? I'm one person.
Yeah.
But who says, well, that's a great idea, that's what we're gonna do?
Ultimately, it's going to come back down to your elected officials. Your planning commission is going to make some recommendations. They're going to go back and make those recommendations to the city councils and the mayors of each of the cities, as well as the fiscal court. And they'll say, we'd like to adopt, and the first thing they're going to do is adopt the goals and objectives and say, this is where we want to be.
So for the county, it'll be the fiscal court.
So the county, it'll be the fiscal court. But recognize we've got a lot of RRE, rural residential estate property, that's in some of our cities that is also being farmed.
Right.
So we have to respect that all of our farming activity is not in an A1 zone. We have farming activity in the RRE zones as well.
The minimum lot size in Boone County in A1 is 5 acres. Do you know what it is in Kenton?
It's not one. I know we're the only one that has pure, just 1 acre.
Bigger than one.
It is bigger than one. I think there are some conditions where it's 2 acres and some conditions where it's 5 acres.
Hey Cindy, Kenton
Yes.
County's 3 acres.
Kenton County is 3 acres. Thank you.
Something kind of unique about Campbell County. If you look at just Alexandria zoning as an example, RRE and agriculture are the same thing. The description is the same thing, but it says if you're over 10 acres, basically you're a farm, is the way it says. This part of the county, RRE zoning is separate from agriculture. Okay, so as the example of Boone County, I'm pretty sure Boone County has an A1 zone, which is cattle, wineries, whatever you want to call it. An A2 zone would be more like kind of a thing where you can raise, just say you can have corn and that, but you're not allowed to have cattle there because it's only 10 acres or something like that. So, you know, when all of us over here that are on planning and zoning that volunteered, okay, I'm in Melbourne, Camp Springs, wherever you want to call it. I got 30 acres, you know, I got horses, I got all that stuff. So we're no different than you are. Some of these regulations been in place since the 80s, basically. Cindy and these people sitting over here, and Dennis, I think, will verify that we've updated the A1 fairly substantially and the RRE just in the past 4 months. And, you know, all of us, I mean, probably me in particular, because I've been here 10 years and I moved from Kenton County because I didn't like people living on top of me. Okay, so I appreciate this much as you do, but, you know, we need your help to tell us what you want us to do. We're there to serve you guys. We're not there to bully anybody or anything else. And these people sitting over here, we all do care about what you say, and we'll do what we can to help you. But it's, you know, your input into this, now's your chance to do it, because none of us that are my age and all the rest of you guys, you know, this is going to be the update's another 8 or 10 years away or whatever it is. And this county, as you know, has changed a lot just in the past 2 years. So we all appreciate, I appreciate AJ Jolly Park, the horse trails, the farms. I go to the Backwoods Farm Tour every year. wineries and everything else, so. You know, really, if you want another zone or whatever, you guys need to tell us what you want us to do so we can do something. And I understand, you know, I gave my daughter 5 acres and they couldn't find anywhere to put a septic on it. I got 30 and I gave her 5 to build a house, and it took me a while to put a septic on it. So I think the A1 thing came up. Remember, when you're talking about going from 1 acre to 2 acres, we're talking about agriculture, not RRE or anything else like that. But if you drive around here, you'll see houses that they're building now. You get a house here and a house here. It's got a septic tank right in the middle of it. Now, we all know septic smells when it rains a lot. So that's the kind of stuff we're looking at to try to, we don't want people coming in here and building houses on the top of sides of hills and having the thing wash out, okay? I mean, I don't want it, and I don't think anybody does. So, you know, really, your input is really valuable now, and you know, I know if you sell off your land, you want to make more money selling it, but you know, I think this thing is more geared towards preserving this discussion, the agriculture land or whatever else you want us to look at. So, you know, it is important that you tell us, because I can assure you these people will listen. I mean, anybody that comes in, you come to a planning and zoning meeting, we want you to talk to us and tell us what you want. You know, we're not there to, like I said, bully anybody or anything. I'm not. I know these guys aren't, so, you know, that's
I would
it.
just like to add to that I'm a non-native resident of the county, and I'm proud to be a resident of the county now. And I'm proud of all of you people coming out for something like this and hanging tough, and I am super impressed with the drive and the super intelligence of figuring out, for instance, the taxes. I couldn't believe how complicated the taxes are for all of you to go through. And we want this to continue. My husband was retired military. We chose this area. We only have 13 acres, but we want you guys to continue. And it takes extra effort, and at the end of the day, you're going to come out to meetings like this. This is your chance.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, we were talking about the 5 acres, or Tom, you were saying about 5. Do you really want to put in that you have to have 5? You've got 3 daughters, right? Are you going to have 3, 5 good acre places if those girls want to build? Wouldn't you rather have 1, and if they want more, give them more?
I haven't thought all the way through. I just know that when you're doing these things, it's the infringement upon your rights when you do any kind of zoning. I mean, it just is. The question is the county better off? Life isn't all about money. Okay, it's just not. And the preservation of things is important. So it just depends on who's willing to give up some of their rights or who's not with regard to how the outcome comes. And, you know, 1 acre to me is just not a lot of land. I would rather see 5. Could I give each girl? No, I couldn't.
Because you're going to have to do it according to planning.
Well, I could probably do it even if I didn't have it, because I don't know where I would put them. You know what I'm saying?
Because we did our
But
children with
you
planning.
have a lot larger stake in it than
Well,
I
our
do.
children with planning and zoning, and we really had a real big hassle trying to
2 to 3
do
years.
road frontage and have it, wide enough, and, yeah, so planning and zoning, that's.
Yeah, it's a it can be,
We just
no
went
question.
through it.
No question.
2 to 3 years to build.
And I will
All 3
acknowledge that
kids.
we've made some changes. I don't know, I have a hard time remembering who was in the crowd last month when we talked through. One of the items that we have added, which was a new zone that came out of our last comprehensive plan update, was an agricultural cluster development overlay, which allowed you to divide a farm with putting 75%, if you had a 40-acre farm, if you put 75% of it in an agricultural conservation zone, then you could do 5 1-acre or 5-acre, anywhere from 1 to 5-acre lots within that area, cluster those homes together and use a gravel road to get back to those homes if they were clustered together. So it's an agricultural cluster development. And the intent was to preserve that family farm. We now have one of those in Campbell County, but I would expect more of them to evolve.
A gravel road,
For
not
an
a county
but not a
maintained?
county maintained road, it would be a private road. That is an agricultural cluster development.
We fought it.
The key, and it is a new zone.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a new overlay zone. We only have one of them that's been implemented to date. But that's because people gave feedback in the last time through and we make some changes. This is, planning and zoning is your planning and zoning. It's not you against me or me against you. This is your plan. This is your planning and zoning commission. The majority of the commission is here tonight to hear from you. We want to work with you. We live in this community as well, and let's work together.
So can I ask, is a gravel road self-maintained for those?
It is a private road that
People
is
have to
maintained by those
maintain.
individual property owners. Yes, and if you want to talk about the agricultural cluster development in more detail, I'd be happy to after this meeting, or any time in the future that you want to. Yes, sir.
But there's one other thing that's come to my mind talking about this, the restriction of, say, 5 acres. Currently, if a piece of property is zoned horticultural, for growing flowers or vegetables, something of that sense, the requirement is for a 5 acre minimum size farm. So that 5 acres would never be allowed to be divided to a sibling or whoever, because it would already be at the 5 acre minimum size.
Well, first off, horticultural is not a zone. Agricultural is a zone. Horticulture would be a use of the property. And I do have to, I know it's semantics, but it means something from planning and zoning, the agricultural use or the horticultural use versus the agricultural zone. So a property would be zoned agricultural, but it could have a horticultural use.
Which would put it in a 5 acre minimum size.
If you're talking farm, are you talking farm exemption?
Yeah, that's what it would give you, it'd be the,
Yeah.
Okay.
give you the farm exemption.
Yeah, silviculture or horticulture.
Right.
5 acres.
versus the 10.
Right.
Correct.
10 acre.
Right.
And I think that, well, that might be what they did in Dune County. Somebody was talking about they couldn't have cattle on it, on horticulture. So.
And that would just be for your tax exemption status. You could still divide it into 1 acre lots. You just wouldn't have that tax benefit anymore.
I'm going to emphasize some of the other changes that some of your peers in this room have made on the land use perspective of item or suggestions that they've made. And a couple of them I'm going to point out. I'm going to go down to the 4th bullet where it was foster infill development and reinvestment and minimizing vacant urban properties. And the intent was to emphasize that infill development in our city areas with the intent of discouraging development out in your farmland communities. So that was a very conscious decision. So it's really important that we monitor these words and that we help to guide them where you want them to be, because then that's what we use for the next steps going forward in developing this plan. So I wanted to point that out to you. There was also another one that I'll point out because we mentioned a little bit about soil stabilities and to balance development and mitigate risk on unstable soils and within special flood hazard zones. So that unstable soils was also added in there, or suggested to be added in there, I should say. Any other discussion?
Hey, Cindy.
Yes.
We have, in the agricultural community, we have quite a few farms located down the Double A corridor. And the thing that I've thought long and hard on is, if I look at Pelham County, they've got water to almost every nook and cranny in Pelham County. Of course, they got a USDA grant to do it because their per capita income was low enough where the government put the bill. I guess my concern is most farmers, and myself included, when we see water and sewer, we see development, which is a hindrance to our operations in the fact that now we have development around us, and just in normal farming operations, I was a cattleman, but you know, cattle are stinky and You've got manure that you have to put out on the fields, and, you know, if I have a subdivision right on one of the, and I've seen it happen, big hay fields, and you're putting out manure and it's raw and it smells, now you become a nuisance to those individuals. And they bought in. I mean, you've been there, you're right, the farm is there, but you do have responsibilities. And even though I have the right to spread that manure, you know, I do have responsibilities, you know, increases my responsibilities to be a good neighbor. So I guess where I'm getting at, the Double A corridor right now, I assume has some water, I don't know how much from how far. If they ever put sanitation down there, then we're looking at some more of our agricultural and prime, there's a lot of prime agricultural land, especially in the southern part of the Double A, that could be subject to some development pressures, and those farms would be, basically would hinder their ability to do business. So I'm concerned that, you know, we, nothing else, look hard at that Double A corridors, maintaining that agricultural look and feel, and the businesses that are there. We have some big farmers actually on there who actually make a living off of their farms on the Double A highway. So that would encroach upon their right to do business the way they do it now.
I'm going to point out, this is a sheet from our last, from the 2008 comprehensive plan. This is the future land use map. I'm going to point out a couple of things on here. The area, the dashed line that you see kind of going around here, kind of the kidney shape, that is the urban service boundary. So that's areas where it's likely, that's a future urban service boundary that we'd have those full utility services in that area in the future. Just kind of orientation, this is 27 coming down through here. This is the Double A highway coming down through here. So you see large areas that are outside of that urban service boundary right now, or outside the future urban service boundary. And we have it from the future land use perspective that would remain agricultural in its use. But there is increasing pressure along both 27 and the Double A to put more utilities in. And that is a very serious discussion that the county does need to have. And when I say the county, I mean you. I mean each of us here in this room tonight, as well as the citizens that are not here today, that we need to have that discussion is where do we want to make that valuable investment? Because we cannot afford to put sewers and water everywhere in the county as much as we'd like to. We've concentrated them in specific areas from a cost perspective, as well as other features out there that we want to have in that certain way in the county. But it is a discussion that we truly do need to have. And I have been part of both of the, heard both of those discussions before. People that want to encourage development along both of those major transportation corridors, and then those that want to preserve it the way it is.
Well, in your previous slide, you talked about infill development. To go along with that, I would think that to build out the US 27 corridor first would be the thing to do in an infill, type activity. I mean, there's parts of 27 that still don't have sewer and water, am I right?
Yes.
Yeah. In the Double A, you can turn that into Coleraine Avenue real quick. It'd be a mistake, but.
Well, the Double A was meant to be a commuter highway, I believe. So, I mean, if we start removing the agricultural land and adding whatever, strip malls or development or condos or anything besides ag land, then that road is in jeopardy of becoming, as Pete said, another Coleraine Avenue with a stoplight every 35 feet.
And even the north end of the Double A, it still is a commuter highway. I would be very, very careful about much development on the Double A. I just don't see that as being advantageous to the character of the county.
Well, what has happened, unfortunately, with the north end of the Double A is Cold Spring has allowed Trees to put that subdivision in, the apartments, and they are very happy to just bend over and let the developers do what they want. And their intention is to put an interchange on Renan Road and dump all that traffic onto Renan Road to get into 27, which is just going to be delightful for the orange schmucks on Renan Road. Which leads me to my question, and I apologize for not raising my hand, but, you know, Northern Kentucky Area Planning Commission, probably about 10 years ago, probably a little bit longer than that, came out with their plan. One of which was to turn Renan Road into a 3-lane highway to connect it up to 27 and the double-A highway. There's been talk over the years about a cross-county thing that ties into 536. I'm assuming you guys have dialogue with North Kentucky Planning Commission, or, Planning Commission. What is the next goal for them? Because eventually 27 is going to become impassable. You're going to have all this traffic that's coming off of these developments up by Cascarusi, and it's going to be a complete and utter gridlock trying to get down that road, and then all of a sudden we're going to need another highway. Where is that all going to fit into with rural development?
Okay, let me talk through a couple of those. This is 536 along through here. So this is 536 from the Visalia Bridge up to 27. In our last land use plan, we talked about the development of that corridor. And basically it's a mixed use development along that corridor, that immediate area. It's pretty much been upgraded already from 536 from the Visalia Bridge up to 27. There is plans to take it from 27 all the way over to the double-A highway. And those are plans that actively, the transportation cabinet, the Kentucky Department of Transportation is actively working on right now. They're actually redesigning it at the moment, but if you wanted to look at the details of that plan, you'd have to contact their offices. But they are actively working on that. They do have it programmed for in the future to begin acquiring right-of-way for that connection. And that's largely the east-west corridor in Campbell County as it stands right now. With respect to Renan Road, Cold Springs, the city of Cold Springs has talked repeatedly with regards to updating and upgrading sections of Renan Road. And that is one of the items that's within their comprehensive plan. They are actually going to be updating their comprehensive plan this year as well. They haven't kicked it off yet. We will be engaged in that. But they will be looking at their comprehensive plan as well. So if you're concerned about Renan Road, we need to talk about it here as well as in Cold Springs, because portions of Renan Road are in the county and portions of it are in Cold Springs.
I guess my point is also is, you know, when double-A highway was built, I'm sure there might be a few people in here who remember Paul Fair pleaded with the state not to put an interchange on that road because that road could not handle the traffic that would be dumped on it from that, which the state obliged and they didn't put it in. And again, that's, I guess, kind of my point. Cold Spring was happy to let the developers put the entrances to those residential developments in places where they should have never gone. It created a problem, and the solution to the problem is, well, then we'll just dump it off on somebody else. So I guess I look to the county planning and zoning people to also have a backbone when it comes to that kind of stuff. And, you know, don't just let it all run downhill. We're not allowed to let our manure piles run downhill. You know, don't let the development problems run downhill onto the rural people just because they want the money off of the taxes and want the development.
And again, I'm going to reemphasize, this is your plan. You've given us some excellent comments. This is not us against you. This is your plan, and you have to help us put those correct words in place that you feel are going to give you the appropriate protection from a farming perspective, but also give you your rights as property owners. And it's that delicate balance in there. It's not a perfect world. How do you find the land that you can actually, divide off and sell, as well as how do you protect it as a working farm? And it's a very delicate balance that we have to. You've offered some specific comments about the AA highway. I think we need to make sure that we've got that wording in there correctly. I'm going to point out a couple other developments that aren't on this map, though, that I want to point out to you. Talked about 536. There's also a new connector road from about the end of Pools Creek, down off of the AA highway where McDonald's is, going back up into NKU. And the Transportation Cabinet is actively working on that alignment as well. There's also another alignment of Route 9 from the AA highway going down through to Newport, and getting that extension going down past Wilder, and then on into connecting down to Route 8 in Newport. So those are three, the 536, the connector road from AA highway up to NKU, as well as the Route 9 extension down into Newport. Those are three substantial transportation improvements that the Kentucky District 6 is working on.
So they're gonna bring a road from, well, it'll always be first Pools Creek to me. Pools Creek to NKU,
Yeah,
like midway up the road, or just right there at that
it's
intersection?
pretty much right. You can actually contact the Transportation Cabinet to look at some alignments,
Mhm.
but it's pretty much going up that hillside behind the,
McDonald's.
behind McDonald's. Thank you.
Well, and at one point, that part, one of their alternatives too was to bring a road like down, is it Gary Lane? Or no, not Gary Lane, what's the other
I
one?
don't know.
The other street up First Pools Creek.
Turn left, yeah, they bought the property.
Yeah, there's a little road off of First Pools Creek, and they had talked about bringing a road, that's it, Darla Drive.
I mean, just as we talk about our sanitation dollars being very limited, our transportation dollars are equally constrained. So we need to choose wisely on those significant transportation investments as to where we want those to go as well. And right now, the big priorities are 536, that connector going up into NKU, and the Route 9 of our significant ones. There are other minor alignments and tweaks that we need to have, but in Campbell County, those are three that are rising to the top in the discussions. Yes, sir.
I gotta find it again, here it is. Under goal, environmental balance, the last
Okay,
bullet
let's pull that
point.
up. Okay.
That last bullet point, reflect the balance between property rights and environment. I don't know why that's not on your vision on the front page.
Okay. All right, that's a good thought. Yes, sir.
Just making a comment primarily to people who are here tonight. The planning and zoning people are under a lot of pressure from developers to build houses and develop the land. And we as agriculture people want to sell our land, I know, but it's a dilemma, as been mentioned before. Are we going to use all of our land up in houses? We need to speak up. If we're interested in preserving what we have out here in the environment, we all need to speak up. And a lot of us are going to let this thing slide through. The farmland work group has worked real hard with Cindy, and she's been very receptive to listening about some of our concerns and preserving our our heritage out here, agricultural heritage. And we need to speak up and let the planning and zoning people, the board, know that we want to preserve this. We don't want the developers to rule on all of this. So that's just kind of a gut feeling, the way I feel about it. And as this thing evolves, we need to make sure that we're monitoring what's happening and get the ear of the planning and zoning board, let them know what we think about this. I see all that green space there on the map you had before in the agricultural zone area, and I sure don't want to see that all go up into the urban zone. It's nice for all my children to have a house on my land, but in 75 years from now, I hate to have US 27 running all over the county like it is up, that you can't get through 27 through Alexandria in the evening.
Other comments?
Is it a state law that they have to have 250 acres for the ag district? Say some people has a 50 to 80
I'm going to defer to
acre
Dennis
farm.
behind you.
Finish first.
I think it's in the KRS. The KRS spells out the ag district pretty much, and the KRS was part of the right to farm for farmers. KRS was one of the tools that legislators realized that was needed to protect farmland. But it's spelled out in the KRS, and it is 250 continuous. So.
If you wanted to actually do a little more research on the Agricultural District and Conservation Act, it's KRS 262.850. And KRS is Kentucky Revised Statute.
Dennis, I know that you all have promoted ag districts, but there may be a need or a window of opportunity to host another meeting to explain ag districts and further that discussion with farmers so that they are aware of ag districts and how that can leverage some protection, I guess, from development in ag.
Is there some way, say, your kids or grandkids are going to inherit your farm, and you wanted to keep it as a farm, you don't want them to divide it, you don't want the second, third generation coming down the road and dividing your farm up. Is there any way you could put your farm in some type of ag district or some kind of clause saying, I want this to stay intact as a farm?
All right, go for it, Dennis.
You're up.
Yeah, there is right now. You can put your farm in a voluntary easement, like conservation easement, where you make that stipulation. You can cut out portions of the farm for future kids to, grandkids to build on. You can take those and set them out of there. But right now, you can put your farm in a voluntary conservation easement where you're saying that this is going to be a farm forever. And, and there's a lot of people, like I say, in the old days, to sell a farm to a farmer, he was giving it away. The guy with the money, that's who he's looking for. And that was probably the developers back then. But now, I'm hearing people who moved here, and I know it as a fact because of a guy bought the farm next to me. He was from a very populated area in Florida, and he he just loves being out in the middle of his farm and nobody bothering him. And that farm went for a whole hell of a lot more than it really was that most farmers around him from the old days would have paid the guy who sold it. So farms are actually becoming a commodity as a whole piece, So the days, I think, of looking at dividing it up into 1 acre lots and making your money, if you want to sell it, you sell it as open space, you sell it as farm. And the guy next door might not buy it, but somebody in Florida, somebody in California, somebody who's coming from a high density area, Boston, they'll snap it right up, think you got a hell of a deal. And I'm telling you, that's the way farmers really have to look at their land now. Not as dividing it up, making money. You can make a whole hell of a lot more money selling it as a piece of open ground. And that's my goal is to hand it off to my farm, my kids. You know, I made it valuable. Yeah, it was just a hillside farm running a few cows, and my wife and I sat down, you know, how are we going to make this so that kids want to keep at a farm and not become a burden in taxes and upkeep and whatnot. And that's how we got into the vineyard business. So they see value in the land. We just looked at what we had and what we could do to make money on it, and we'll keep that farm in the family another 140 years. So, but, you know, I think farmland as farmland is worth a whole lot more money than, and we're thinking in the paradigm that it's farmland ain't worth a whole hell of a lot. You gotta look in the world market. I mean, we got people buying up farms from all over.
That's what I mean, I want to keep it intact.
Right. And you could put it in a conservation easement, you know, if you ever get a PDR program going, you know, you could be paid for your development rights, but that's a ways down the road. But you could put it voluntarily in an easement and then have it, you know, be a farm forever, but, you know, you're not really cutting yourself out of any dollars. You're probably increasing its value.
Hey, Dennis, I just come from a meeting this past weekend, the Kentucky Woodland Owners Association. And there's a lot of people there that are putting their timber farms into working timber farms through those easements where they get their development money today.
Right.
But they're allowed to do timber development
Right.
for the next 1,000 years.
You got a program, and, you know, Jefferson County has one in the Lexington area. You know, you get paid for selling those development rights.
Right.
And you can take your money and you can retire, and most farmers that I've run into over the years, I mean, I had a neighbor had a really nice farm, you know, but when he got too old, literally he didn't want his farm having houses on, but when he got too old to go feed the cows, that was his 401k, that was his money. And he sold the farm and they built houses on it. But it wasn't his first wish. If he had the opportunity to do something else, he would have took that opportunity just to keep it as a farm.
That conservative easement is actually stronger than your agricultural district.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Nobody will ever go in there and
Right.
do anything to it.
You can't get out of it. I mean, once you sign, it's a farm. So, you know, it's like getting married. You better be damn good and sure you want to do it.
Other discussion tonight? You guys have been wonderful. Thank you very, very much. Please keep the dialogue open. My contact information is at the bottom of that sheet. I want to hear from you. The members of the Planning Commission want to hear from you. Your elected officials want to hear from you as well. Please, please, please stay engaged in the comprehensive plan update process, because this is your plan.